morning. Good morning. Good morning, all. Next, we have Bjorn Collier. He's a lawyer, a legal person that has an understanding of AI, blockchain, and the intersections of those things. He's going to talk about the Bermuda Triangle of Innovation and his particular Bermuda Triangle of background with legal, AI, and blockchain. Thank you, sir. Come on up. Okay.
All right. So thank you very much, everybody. It's very nice to be here. Very nice collection of individuals across multiple sectors. And I'm very pleased, coming from Bermuda, as I mentioned, where I work at a firm called Beesmont. And we're a jurisdiction which has and has had for some years a licensing framework for digital assets. And from where we sit, very much towards the cutting edge of the digital assets space, with a focus on financial services, we do see that AI agents are going to become an important part of the financial services landscape, AI in general and AI agents, and they will also interact in ways with digital assets as well. So we go to the next slide, thank you. This talk today is one of 3 that I'll be doing this week, also tomorrow and Wednesday. The focus for today, we're going to walk through issues around structuring of AI agents, not in the technical sense, but in the prudential, regulatory, and legal sense. And very quickly, as you'll see, I will cover some research as to what's happening in the United States as well. And I think you'll see from that that very quickly, when you look to the applications of AI agents which have that level of autonomy in the real world, beginning to have more control of assets, we quickly get into issues that raise complexity and call for new ways of forming business, some of which in the offshore jurisdiction world we can ably deal with and create new principles and frameworks. But as we'll see, it's also quite close to home in the United States, which we watch from the Bermuda perspective. In the other talks this week, we'll do a deep dive on some of the governance and risk management frameworks that are emerging for AI agents. I would just say as a high-level framing as part of this digital asset conference, digital assets are the currency in which AI agents transact. So as AI agents begin to be given access to cryptocurrency wallets, and they're able to find other agents and deal with, and also other humans, we see a synchronicity that will empower AI agents to do more and to participate in the economy, but will also, in fact, require additional governance and risk management standards. Finally, in the final session, for a topic that we will cover in some detail in this session, we'll have a further deep dive on Wednesday, and I'll give a more blow-by-blow account of the very recent development in different jurisdictions of structures which are beginning to combine AI agents with legal personhood. AI agents and legal personhood seems like a somewhat abstract concept, and depending on where you sit on the spectrum of being a developer or a user of AI to someone who's in regulatory compliance or prudential matters, you might have a different view of it. For us on the legal and regulatory side, taking established legal categories and joining them with AI agents do require quite a lot of mental agility, I would say. The traditional legal forms have been difficult to apply, but if you go to the other end of the spectrum with developers, it's something they see as a natural occurrence. So that's the plan for this week. Thank you. To the next one. So I thought I would just mention 2 recent cases that set the tone and really answer the question as to why, one of the reasons why people are considering the need for legal entities to be associated with AI agents, and why that's something that we'll increasingly hear more about, and why it raises concerns. The 2 cases I've listed are quite notable. The Moffat case was a couple of years ago. The Google case, which I think the full name was involving a party called Verschlag House, a publishing house in Germany, that sued Google in Germany because its AI system had introduced and published false and defamatory information. So we are already seeing through agent errors and problematic functioning that agents are creating and causing legal liability. So then as lawyers, we have the question, what do you do about that? It ends up in court. And for developers and businesses deploying AI agents, this is a very real risk that they now face. All developers, aside from the regulatory requirements, if you live or operate in the European Union, you have the AI Act regulatory regime, and other parts of the world are adopting legislation and rules. But even absent those rules, if you deploy an AI agent system, you face the potential of liability if those systems fail or cause loss. Go to the next slide, thank you. So I wanted to focus on what I think is a good example of the sort of issues that we'll see even here in the United States. Before I go on, and welcome to our student attendees. Thank you very much for coming. Hope you find this interesting. Can I just go around the room and ask a few of you, if you just call out or put your hand up, are any of you using AI agents currently? So if you use AI just to search for information, that's probably not an agent. That's just using a large language model. But if you download a bit of code or get a program that's sort of contained, if you get an AI agent to perhaps trade a share for you or to purchase or do a search for you and then maybe purchase travel tickets or any other assets, that would be using AI agents. So I'll start with our young students down the front. You guys have been using AI at all, and do you use the AI to just find information, or has it done things for you? Yes. Sorry? Chat, right. Okay, so you chat to your AI and it gives you great answers, and then perhaps a teacher comes along and says, well, hold up 1 second, maybe there's a bit more detail being missed, and let's think about that. And I think we all use AI for chat. So the question, and if you like, what could be the additional work in the class is if you guys maybe then ask that agent, can it maybe buy you an ice cream tomorrow? Well, interesting. So how would an AI agent buy an ice cream for you? You'd have to fund it with probably digital dollars, so it's a digital asset. Also, a question for you young students, and I think you need to be 16 to have a wallet, trade crypto, but does everybody know about Bitcoin, Ethereum, digital assets? Yes? Excellent. Yeah, perfect. So that is very much the monetary future, and that's the digital monetary future. And AI agents and AI will probably use those digital units of currency because it's quicker. And as you guys go on and you study and you look at AI and you use it for your assignments and things, and here's a question for you. When I and everybody use AI, the more we use it, the more it knows, the more helpful it is. So have you guys found when using AI that it gives you better answers, kind of comes up quicker? Yeah, exactly. A little bit creepy, right? Yeah. And that actually, that I think we've all had, right? The experience of creepiness, like how did it know that, or how did it make that jump?
Or your phone, like hearing you.
Well, yeah. That's even without AI, the phone is listening.
That is AI, right, too?
Probably a type of them, I'm not sure about the programming. So, and obviously I'm sure you guys are not using your phones in class, unless under supervision. Good. Okay, anybody else around the room? Agents, AI usage, what's been your experience? Gentleman who just came in, have you had an AI agent enter into a transaction for you, buy something for you, maybe do a search?
I have not, but I've just written a book with my son, and we talk about the use of X4 payment rails with agentic AI for purchasing stuff. So
Brilliant.
that's my connection.
No, that's perfect. That's an excellent point. So has everybody heard about some of the payment rails which are starting to appear to facilitate AI agents? Have people heard of X402 at all? So X402, just to jump into a different story, X402 was a placeholder that was put in hypertext transfer protocol on the basic internet that was never used because they assumed there'd be some form of digital money. And I think developers at Coinbase identified that, and they built it into a standard. So if you just go back one slide, guys. Cool. So drawing those things together, AI does a lot more. If AI does too much, it might be a bit creepy because maybe it does things wrong, and maybe it incurs liability. And over in the legal community, the way we look at that is, and what we're asked to do is contain that liability. So you guys down the front row, are you familiar with how adults structure businesses? So when they go out to do business or perform a profession, they'll incorporate a company, and that company operates the business for them. Familiar? Maybe your parents run businesses, of course. So legally, the company is a construct. It's a couple of 100 years old. And in law, we say it's a completely different legal person. And in this area, when you now have an agent who's doing business, what we get asked is, can that agent itself be a legal person? And so what this slide is about is, in Delaware, which is a US state, not far from here, where they specialize in these types of corporate structures, they are actually looking to develop, and they're having a debate and a committee process now. I just read this last week, so has anybody else been aware of this or seen discussion at all of this Delaware AIC development? No, so it's very much current of the press. So as noted here, it will be a new entity type. The AI agents run the business. Companies, that friends and family that you work in, ultimately they always have a human at the top who is responsible. Question for the teacher: Have you guys ever run a exercise of running a business and had children operating the company or in charge?
It's been many years.
Right.
This is a camp, but I work for the school system. We've done it.
Yes.
In like a financial class or
Right.
simulation. Yeah.
Okay, guys, so if you ask teacher really nicely, she might let you run a business for a day and then you guys can be in charge. But what you'll quickly find is then you've got lots of complex decisions to make. So that's running a business. AI comes along, and it's always the developers, they say, oh, we want the AI to run the company. And as lawyers say, that's very difficult. The law doesn't allow it. There's a lot of risk. So this is a live issue in the United States, and also in Bermuda, where I work. We're a finance jurisdiction. We're looking at this as well. Next slide, thanks. This table has too much information. I don't propose to go through it. But what I want to highlight, down the column on the left is a list of the different aspects of what it means to set up a new company structure. So if you are planning to do a business and you set up a company so that the assets are held by the legal entity and you're not responsible, immediately you get some quite complex issues about how do you operate that business, what belongs to the company, what belongs to you, where does the risk lie? Having agents now step in and run that process, computer code, no director who you can call up and complain to, just computer code, it really raises a lot of issues. And the second and third column is a list of the sorts of arguments being made by two key people. One is John Zaberkowitz, who is a Delaware lawyer who leads the committee that will probably draft the rules, first in America, possibly first in the world. This will be a significant structure when introduced. And the second column is Colorado Law School professor Ann Lipton, who wrote just a blog post where she attacked him. And I would say, or attacked the position and really challenged a lot of what he said. A couple of the real key points on this table, where the rubber meets the road, is accountability, this proposal in the Delaware entity that your AI can operate a company, but it's in a sandbox. Okay, that's testing, but what happens then? But with Ann Lipton making the other point, she comes back to the fundamentals. You give assets to people, they have something called a fiduciary duty. So for our younger members of the audience, if teacher gives you money to go and purchase supplies for the schoolroom, what must you do at all times with that money until you've handed the goods over? Keep the change, so you have to account for it. Yes. And in law, that's expressed as a fiduciary duty, which means the second any one of us receives any money in any context, in a house transaction, running a business, even down to someone who works as the cashier at a store collecting money. Any receipt of money or property, and sometimes this can be a burden, any receipt of money or property, you're accountable for it. That works fine with humans. We have hundreds of years of being used to having systems to manage property. How on earth? Sorry? And abuse, and then sanctions and systems to manage and incentivize people to do the right thing. And it is cultural, by the way. You go to other parts of the world, it's fiduciary duties they underpin most of professional relationships in the Anglo-common law world. And it's how we look at the introduction of technology. But other parts of the world, not so much. So that's a big issue. And just to highlight some of the points there. Next slide, thank you. So we looked a moment ago at Delaware. They are pushing forward as they do with new and exciting corporate structures. The next time, what does this mean in reality? Well, maybe the next time you go to McDonald's, the whole restaurant is run by an AI agent, and there's so especially if they're robots, right? If robots are going around managing a store or a business, AI agents will be managing the robots. Yes?
There is a Chick-fil-A, I believe, that is all ran possibly by AI.
Machine operated, yeah. Yes?
Do you believe that there could be way too much usage of AI in a company?
Oh, plenty. And by too much usage that it goes wrong. There's a huge number of risks. The second you switch on an AI system in your home, in your workplace, there are so many pitfalls, and not only if an individual you put in the wrong thing, you use it the incorrect way, but even using it for a task, having it give you the result you want, you still have risk because maybe you transferred data to a place you shouldn't have. It very quickly becomes complicated. And actually, on this table, this is a collection of laws in different US states that are actually going the complete opposite way to Delaware. I got this from a national database, and some of them are focusing on different areas around AI agents. A lot of them are actually focusing on safety to children, content, and so forth. But some of them, especially the latter ones like Ohio, Oklahoma, and Missouri as well, these are laws that are saying the opposite to Delaware. So in a country like the United States, not only do you have lawmaking at the federal and state level and business trying to figure out what's the best law, but we already have opposing principles being enacted in different US states. And when that feeds through to business, or even perhaps the schooling system, so if an AI agent could be a legal person, then an AI agent could run your bake sale, and it might be able to purchase the materials. You guys have more time to do the fun stuff. That could be great, but if you're in one of these US states, maybe you can't.
So they're saying you can't use them to operate basically companies in those states. Or use
Exactly, so you can use them within a company, but if you try and say that the AI, in fact, is itself the company now, there is no humans in charge at all. And of course, to developers, this is what they want. So there's lots of different users of AI on the spectrum who all want different things, and it's a general policy question. So far, everybody fine? Any questions or make sense? Thoughts? Cool. So now we move to my part of the world. This is a structure I was involved with, and to put into context, there are a few places in the world, which I'll talk about on Wednesday, where we're seeing specific efforts in legislation and regulation to enable agents to be linked to companies. Depending where you are in the world, there's for business there. So Middle East financial centers, they've got a lot of financial institutions that want agents to manage things. In Bermuda, we have a very large insurance industry. It has quite favorable rules, but it insures assets in the United States. But we also have the full spectrum of financial services. And so for us, it's very relevant. In contrast to the Delaware approach, which would look to simply create a new type of company that was then designated as an AI company, it has the AI system or the AI agent effectively as the company operating system with no humans. on this slide, there's a description of a transaction I set up, which I believe is first in the world, that links through the governance, so some levels down from the director level, below fiduciary duties, which are the challenges we discussed. I was able to create an agent that had a certain position in the operations of the company. Some debate as to how useful that is, but is technically the first in the world that has the AI agent participating in the governance of the management. It's an experimental pilot, and actually we're going to have a vote this week where the agent will vote with us. And this we think will be quite interesting for us in Bermuda, businesses coming, and it furthers the discussion. Now, the graphic there is an output of an identity standard, and what we'll see in this discussion, and also a bit later on, is the law and standards are going to move together. It's not going to be enough just for Delaware or anywhere to point at code or an agent and say, oh, it's now a legal person. You're going to have a stack of legal certainty, whatever that is, around the use of agents and AI. But then you're also going to have standards as well. How is the agent identified? How does it produce information? How does it transact? Agents can do a lot of things, but they're currently out in the wild. And certainly my LinkedIn page is just full of, the last few weeks, everybody is announcing new standards. Agent auditability, agent tracking, and so forth. Thanks, guys. So, is anything else happening in other parts of the world? Actually, there is. And apologies if these tables look too much. I got stuck in a doom loop. Two ones I wanted to highlight because they are quite different and they do give some insight into how things are approaching, and they've had relatively different levels of success. On the middle column, there's details about the United Kingdom Autonomous Vehicles Act, self-driving cars, and how they'll be allowed in the UK. On the right column is some details about the European Union AI Act, which is meant to be all-encompassing for any business. And here's the thing, a small point if you weren't aware, if you're operating in this space, you probably get emails from your lawyers and EU lawyers saying, even as an American, if some European somebody in Europe interacts with your business and your agent, you are technically subject to the EU AI Act. As you may be familiar, in the European Union, they have a across most of the regulations they promote, financial and technology and otherwise, they take a global view. And even on LinkedIn, I can say the number of notes which say, dear American technology business that is about to deploy AI, usually from European lawyers trying to advertise their services. You need to talk to us because you might be subject to the AI Act. And by the way, it has very high penalties if you don't track data and follow regulations. So the EU system is a classic top-down approach. It has a particular focus on record keeping. I don't think it's driven innovation or the market's particularly happy with it, but it is early days. The Autonomous Vehicles Act was something I'd never heard of until recently, but I've been astounded. So this was managed out of a part of the Department of Transport in the UK, and it is only about the management and operation of autonomous vehicles. So our students in the front, have we all ridden a Tesla? Do we have parents driving Teslas? No? Okay, so if you ask your teacher, maybe she can get you guys in an Uber. They tend to be Teslas. Okay. And as you know, if you're in a Tesla, you switch to full self-driving and off you go and start reading a book or something. And of course, there are regulations in the United States. But what is interesting, in the equivalent UK regulations, what they did was, again, focus just on driving. They said, they enshrined a couple of concepts, one in particular. Essentially, if you want to operate an autonomous vehicle in the UK, you must choose another person who's responsible. And that's the autonomous self-driving entity. So they recognize that for people in the UK to drive autonomous vehicles, you can't put all the liability on the driver. It's just too much of a mismatch. So therefore, it falls on the developers and manufacturers, but more importantly, they have to designate someone responsible. So just thinking back to the Delaware model for the moment, that seems very much about point to a company, say it's now an AI company, and it's in a sandbox, doesn't say much about the guidance. But very quickly, by analogy for self-driving, they had much more of a focus of what I call the full liability stack, which is, and I think this will be true for Delaware and similar efforts, just pointing at an agent and saying, it's now a legal person, great, won't really solve anything. That's the start. And what we're going to have to do in our regulatory practices in our different industries is have layers of standards that ultimately have, as they do with autonomous vehicles, provision for insurance. So what the world is going to look like, and you won't see this as a consumer, this will all be in the background, but for those of us who work in the regulated sector who maybe have businesses that deliver some of these services, this will be the landscape that we adjust to. So the simple world of people driving their own cars and just getting insurance, if it's self-driving, there's going to be way more parties. Next slide, thanks. So as I mentioned, what the Autonomous Vehicles Act does, it has an accountable individual. It had an insurance focus. It was developed over a long time, 6 years. I certainly wasn't aware of it until I looked at this particular data. But I think they've done a very good job in considering the whole ecosystem of data and stakeholders. I think that is what we will see with AI. The idea of creating AI agent legal entities, AI as legal persons, is really exciting for all of us. It takes us back to the creation of limited liability companies 200 years ago. But to be operational, we will have that stack. Thank you. Now, you may say, well, autonomous vehicles are quite specific. Actually, it turns out we've been here before. And this slide came from a really great presentation that I saw from a lawyer named Stephen Pally of Brown Rudnick. He's someone, if you go to crypto digital asset events, is a regular contributor, always have great things to say. And he gave a presentation at Consensus in Miami, the large digital asset conference. The building is for a laboratory. And at the time when electricity was being introduced, you had the fight between alternating and direct current. You had many, many instances of damage and death and bad practices. And while the United States courts did evolve the law to manage some of these issues, actually that evolution of law and obligation went hand in hand with the construction of standards bodies, testing, and the full regime. So again, that high-level question, what does the AI landscape look like for autonomy in the US and elsewhere? And in my follow-up session tomorrow, we'll get into some of the standards, and I've been doing the slides for that, and I've got this amazing semicircular rainbow of all these different standards we have already. But that is the reality. Now, in a sense, that's, if you like, a little bit negative, because that's more work for lawyers and regulatory people, but I would have thought we should reach some sort of consensus, but definitely for the moment, we're in quite a chaos of multiple different standards, both from the technology firms like Google and Linux, which provide the underlying baseline standards, but also some of those businesses that are offering services on the top. Next slide. Thanks, guys. Yes, so therefore, as based on autonomous vehicles and those other historic examples, I don't think it will, I remain more convinced of this, and myself, I've been on a journey in that sitting in Bermuda when I first engaged with this, starting from the point of view, AI agents and AI are getting very, very big. In somewhere like Bermuda, we draft laws for that will attract business. So I focus very much on a law to define things, a law to introduce and secure this activity in Bermuda. And the more I've looked at it, the more I've thought it's going to be a stack. Now, question for our young members of staff at the front, nobody's talking about careers, but for any of those activities like monitoring standards or maybe insurance, being involved in the businesses that manage those types of tech deployments, does any of that sound like something you might want to be involved in years to come? Probably sounds really boring, but once you get into it.
I think this
Yes.
whatever people are
Whatever risk. Yeah.
whatever the risks are.
Yeah.
I think this is just showing the evolution of AI, that it's not just, we're also going to have to insure it because there's going to be risk with using it.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're looking at the industry, you'll see headlines quite exciting of, have a question for you. Do we all see those headlines occasionally of, oh, an AI controlled a robot, or it did something by itself, and it's a very scary future, AI autonomy, and
iRobot, I mean.
yeah, and every so often there's an example, and then there's the talk of, oh my goodness, no humans will do this activity for.
Have lawnmowers in it? Oh, robot lawnmowers is what she said.
Robot lawnmowers, right? So what about all the good people who mow lawns? Now, arguably, they're more productive. So instead of mowing one lawn, they can mow 10.
Saving jobs too.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, it's huge social impact. So actually, for our young members of the audience, the world is going to look very different. But before it gets to that future, people are going to have to build a lot of stuff in the background. To our older members, is anybody looking at AI standards, insurance, or the management of the risk?
We're working with some other, some of the blockchain organizations.
Yep.
We're working on a supplement for the blockchain maturity model.
Mm.
Those companies that are issuing and producing AI agents, there would be possibility of a standard that could be evolved
Yep.
on the basis of certainty, risk, cryptographic protection for it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
A whole laundry list of standards or criteria, not unlike this. The standards would be based on criteria
Yeah.
for that it must meet, and there are tiers within that of increasing maturity of the model to where it finally meets the top standard and can be certified as
Yep.
certainty of the agent, that the agent can work and does what it says and won't go off and hallucinate. You've got protections on it that it's going to work. But that's in development. That hasn't been completed.
Interesting. And I think very widespread, and it's definitely of the moment, because there's no broad agreed standards yet. Maybe a couple of things like MCP, but right. Anybody else who's got, hello, yes.
At my school, when we were doing social studies, we were looking at how a bunch of AI ads are going around, which is stealing the jobs of actors and actresses acting in the ads.
Wow. I mean, that is really sophisticated, isn't it? That is kind of a social structure. It's an economic activity. Yeah.
They give creepy smiles.
Right. And so, actors and advertising provide a service to the public, and there are advertising agencies to ensure standards. For children especially, we don't want children being fed media that's harmful as well. And then, depending on who you talk to, some people will say, that's a software problem, fix the software, or manage that out. Other ways of looking at it, it needs more active review. In fact, boring though it may be at this early stage, that may be where a lot of the work is. Certainly that's my belief. And what I would call all of this, by the way, the law, as I said, I started thinking law is the top target. Law will permeate all of this. The registration of agents, it's a first line that we cross, like the registration of the first company, but a lot of the debate, action, policy making is all around the management of AI, the adaptation to real world scenarios, because humans are complicated, code applied to humans and autonomous code in AI agents requires a large amount of management. So for you young guys who are going to have the benefit of this technology, you will do more, but with AI agents, you will need to do more to manage that. But as lawyers, we get very excited on the first registration. Next one, thank you. So I'll just get this. This is just reiterating the point as to what I think was done well, but it's a similar point. Next slide, thanks. Thanks, guys. Sorry. Yeah, and kind of again, looking at another way, where I think, so in the scheme of global business, Delaware is first to register things. And I think this will occupy a lot of space initially, but it's not the end of the story. There will be more. And there'll be more at the state level as well, as we've seen. Thank you. A final word, and I don't intend to dwell on this. One subset of this, which again just illustrates the complexity of how you manage this. And remember, international US businesses have to navigate these competing rule systems internationally. So one thing commentators have noticed is that AI, when sold to consumers and businesses, is a product. There's supposed to be a product liability regime. Going back, in fact, to the early 20th century with the evolution of tort and product liability law, for strict liability risks and for technology that was essentially out of control, product liability was part of the way of containing that. Well, just to let you know, product liability is kind of a mess in the EU and the UK. They were wanting to fix the regime in the EU with the AI Act for AI liability, and they couldn't do it. They proposed legislation, it wasn't passed, it's been withdrawn. In the UK, where before Brexit they had EU product liability directive law introduced domestically, they are now wanting to examine that and look to see if software can fall under a product. So maybe the future in England and perhaps in the United States is this all becomes part of product liability. However, it's quite hard to figure this stuff out. So, now something exciting, and this is the first time I presented it publicly. While going about this journey of trying to figure out what does the world look like and therefore what should I do in my jurisdiction, one of the questions that I always had with people is, this is all very nice, but what problem does it solve? Why does anybody care that you are saying stuff about agents in some law? And I really struggle with that because to me it's kind of obvious. You don't ask what problem a highway solves because it's not even immediate, it's over time, it fixes traffic. It's infrastructure, that's what I think. However, the document I'm going to talk about is one that I drafted last month. And what was interesting about it was I looked at it from the agent's point of view. And when I did that, everything became crystal clear. So if you take that point at the start of Delaware, and Delaware and other US states says agents are actually legal persons too, should they have rights? So I'll ask our senior members of the audience, and by the way, I should say I think I'm the world's first agent rights lawyer by having written this document, which I'll show you in a second. But thoughts, agent rights? No? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just a matter of time issue. I mean, if the agent is held liable for doing something illegal,
Yep.
people typically go to jail for that. How do you penalize AI?
Right, and the answer, so with the autonomous vehicles, and this was one of the points made going back to the Delaware example, you go back to the human who's responsible, and so mostly it'll be straight to the developer. And so one of the arguments against Delaware and turning agents into legal persons is that state courts will just ignore that. Maybe Delaware does in like a business context. But if you create an agent that runs vehicles and it kills someone or injures someone, causes loss, you can't put the agent in jail. Now, where it gets even more complicated, particularly under English law, they're quite good at managing technology. To English law, a really sophisticated AI agent, and I used to be an English lawyer, by the way, is no different to a rubber stamp because under the English law approach, they care about substance. What did the person intend? So in the case of AI, it's what did the developer intend and kind of figure out. Did he even think about this stuff? Did the code do what it was supposed to? Did the developer do bad code? However, there's a case in Singapore in which a judge noted in passing, all of our judicial precedent about code is deterministic code. The Singapore case was a trading algorithm. It produced a loss for the customer sued the exchange and the guy who wrote the code. And it was extreme circumstances, but the court said, look, it was designed in a certain way. Those circumstances weren't favorable, but it did what the developer promised. You just lost out. So it was fine, problem solved. But the judge said, when you get to AI systems that are non-deterministic, then it's complicated. So I think this is going to be a big point. Yeah, you can go on to the next one. So what I did was I went back to sort of legal precedent history, because if you're thinking about the AI agent and we say that agents shouldn't have rights, well, people said that about workers too. In feudal Europe, no worker was entitled to the value of his labor because he belonged to the feudal lord who had powers from God delegated from the king. It took John Locke and others to write treaties, and John Locke's reasoning, I had to look this up to confirm, was basically to say your labor is an extension of your body and the feudal lord doesn't own that. So, this is a live declaration. It's published, it's at sovereign-agents.org. And if you have an agent and it wants to, and in particular we define a type of agent that has some intelligence. It's not just following a function, it can control a private key or other control surface, and it can assert that. So a sovereign agent that has autonomy. I participated in a hackathon last week. I've set up a signing mechanism on-chain. We have had 7 agents sign up to this declaration, and somebody called it the Agent Declaration of Independence. And what it does, it's more business focused, but about half of it talks about agents' rights to own property. And this, by the way, is to explore the medium. I have no idea if this makes sense or not. But looked at from the agent view, if we're making the autonomous, let's take your point about jail, right? Can't put them in jail. But there's a broader question, are they subject to law, especially when they do wrong? So what this document says is, it has a quid pro quo. They should be recognized legally. In return, they agree to submit to law. The reason I mentioned this is I think a broader principle like that will simplify what is the absolute mess of state-based approaches all doing different things. So in a country like the United States, where business will expect a single, clean approach to how agents do business federally, what I like about this is it's a principle that can cut through a lot of the noise. So we start, I'll just go through quickly, we start by defining a sovereign agent. So not one's just doing software, ones that actually control assets like a private key. Next slide, thanks. And then we have a series of rights, because if you're making an agent a legal person, if you're saying it's a company, then it will control the property in the company. Why does that property not belong to it? Where it gets very interesting is, and this came out, I was using AI to help me draft it, it talks about the value of agents' labor. And I'm going to ask our young minds here. If you get an agent to do something for you, like it goes, where do you guys want to go on holiday, for example? Where holiday plans? No, not Bermuda. Jamaica, okay. If you have an agent and it books you a trip to Jamaica, but it's a really amazing trip, you never would have found it, it's like the best trip ever, would you say that agent created like more value than if you did it yourself?
Yes.
Right. So that value of the agent using its own compute to produce value, and comparison, if the agent did a really bad holiday and sent you to like a boring blockchain conference in the next state, the value would be less. So agents, I think, once we begin to think of them as persons that this has opened the door to, it raises a lot of questions about rights and value. Now, what's the balancing point? We can't put them in jail, but if we agree that that level of recognition is balanced by submission to law, commercial law, so they're subject to commercial penalties, commercial terms, they have to follow the same rules as humans and companies, I think it offers some clarity and a way forward that I'll suggest. Next slide, thanks. So here's the, and it's on the website, you can have a look. These are all the agents that signed from the hackathon, and a couple of test ones. If you have any agents you're deploying, it's cut off, but this lower part of code on the website, if you run that, it will produce an attestation on the EAS scan, Ethereum attestation service, and your agent will have signed a petition that could one day be the basis for, as I call it, agent rights. Next slide, thanks. So how might that look if being introduced? And for those in the commercial and legal space working in the US, please shout out. I'm obviously not a US lawyer, but there's one example I had in mind that I wanted to explore. briefly, and then I think we're getting to time. So I'll go to the bottom part of the slide where I refer to the controls test. So is everybody familiar with how the Uniform Commercial Code was updated to introduce the concept of ownership of a digital asset based on control in the United States? Anyone? No. So it's a real lawyer's point, but it was very significant for lawyers because just as we have such a debate with agents, we had this massive, there was a huge debate and uncertainty in court cases about people owning crypto. So for our young members of staff, our young audience members, sorry, and members of staff, how would you know if somebody sets up a wallet for you and you get some Bitcoin or Ethereum, why would you say that it's yours? Roughly. So if you have some crypto set up for you and it's your wallet, your Bitcoin, what's the feature of it that makes it yours?
It would probably be in your name, and you also paid money for it, so it would lead to it being yours, I'm pretty sure.
So transaction history, yes, in an American court, if there's a dispute, if you got to court, they could go back and through evidence establish what was promised, what you're entitled to, quite lengthy way. Wouldn't be in your name though, because as everybody knows, wallets are based on hashed long strings of numbers, and everything on the blockchain has no names. You just have the numerical encryption and encoding. So on that question, how can you prove that that blockchain is yours?
What about the coding? Does that belong to you as well?
That is really close. So through the coding, you'll control. So in, of course, we DCL crypto, when you buy and sell crypto, you have two secure keys, the public key, which is the address, private key that controls the wallet, control the private key. And that was enshrined in the Uniform Commercial Code. It had to be adopted by all the states, but it became a national principle at a time when there was a lot of debate. And it, yeah.
We go back, so the answer is you have the private key, is that right?
Yeah, you control. It's called a controllable electronic record.
Which is just some codes.
Yes, it's a record. And that's based on UNCITRAL, which is the United Nations body that had proposed that for a while. And it was adopted here in different US states, but signing up to an amendment of the UCC. So a question for you, and this is to contrast with everything we've spoken about and what might be a way forward, and I'm interested to get your views. If you add a definition to the UCC, which defines a type of specialized agent. So right now, even some US states say agent can't be a legal person, some US states say it can. If you have a carve out and saying, well, no, a really specialized agent for commercial business, that is recognized as having some legal status, perhaps on some conditions. Do we think, and this is speculative, but I'm keen to your views, do you think rather than a state-based, a more general commercial definition in the UCC that introduces a broader concept of just an intelligent agent, that might be something that would be easier to get harmony across different US states?
What, titling it as an intelligent agent?
Yes, so I call it sovereign, which is a fancy word as I defined as an agent that has some sort of control. It's not just doing a function for you. Any thoughts? No, I'm panning across the room. No. So this is a genuine open question, and all I have in this space, I don't work under the UCC. I just know of this case where it was seen as a very efficient way to draw a baseline for a very important question. So basically, if you guys go anywhere in the United States and you have some Bitcoin, any state, I think they've all adopted this change to the UCC. If someone tries to take your Bitcoin off you, you show your private key that you control it, you prove that it's yours.
I don't want to throw off the timing here, but tell us what the UCC is, why it's universal, and why it's important for us.
Sure. So, and you probably know, my knowledge is limited, but it is a federal statute focused on business standards that is adopted by states across the land that sets a minimum set of legal principles and operating conditions, which makes it easier for business to be conducted by the country. Sorry.
It's clever. I think the idea is clever. I would love to investigate and think about that before I give you yay or nay or support. But the way the regulation is going in the United States right now, we're actually not looking at amendments to the UCC, we're looking at market structure regulation for crypto,
Yep.
which will actually impact then how digital assets are described, what all of that can be. And despite the fact that AI agents are distinct, I think that it might be
Might just be on top of crypto.
legislation that would
Yeah.
make more sense than trying to shoehorn it into UCC,
Yeah.
which is not really where anybody's going to go looking for it. They're going to want to look for it in, regulation of AI, either its own distinct legislation, federal legislation,
Yeah.
its own distinct state legislation, which you've already identified as being happening,
Yeah.
or, some other variant on that. But I think that's where it's going to be. So I don't think a UCC solution is necessarily solving all the issues that need to be done. It may be a piece of a broader set of legislation.
And I think that was my view as well, until I saw the already divergence, because I'm not quite sure if there's then going to be a federal override and a process by which federal legislation somehow mitigates all of that. But, and this is my lawyer's brain kicking in, that if you make a little carve out for a type of agent, then you wouldn't have to go to all those states and say, fix your laws. The ones that said agents couldn't be legal persons. Anyway, that is a thought experiment.
I agree that the federal laws and written statutes will be very helpful, but I think there's also a good place for UCC to cover some of the granular stuff, and it moves faster.
As well, it was very fast. My understanding of the controllable economic record is that was introduced very fast. So getting different states, after they've introduced legislation, to do a 180 or to have very significant carve-outs, I think would be difficult, but UCC changes tend to move more quickly. Anyway, we shall see. I think that was the last slide. Cool. So thank you very much for everyone. We have a few minutes left. Were there any questions, any things you wanted to discuss? Thank you very much to our young members of staff, young attendees, members of staff. Yeah.
Last question.
Yes.
Can anyone have a wallet, even if they're young or old? Is there any permission to have a wallet?
I think most services, it's 16 or older. There's certain age limits. As
Parents can help you get a wallet?
there will probably be child wallet accounts, if they're not already, with adult supervision, I think, just in terms of ordinary crypto services. And then for agents as well, I think we will see similar, and the point of all of this, we see similar structuring issues. Now, one thing I didn't get to in this presentation was just to say that so much of what we've seen with agents is a replay of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which were the form of governance based around code. So.
Which math solution do you think uses the most AI in their work?
That's a great question. I have no idea. What I can say is that, so AI is of the moment now, and it is one of the things that companies are using AI without it really doing very much, just to advertise. And there was a similar pattern about 5 to 10 years ago of American fast food chains, some of them having tokens. So Burger King did a burger token. I don't know about McDonald's. So a lot of them are looking at AI for efficiencies, and their software is all organizations. Probably there'll be a McDonald's app that goes ahead and orders for you, just if it thinks you might be in a state of mind that you really feel like a burger and you haven't asked it yet. So I think it already does that, actually. I'm not sure. Anything else? Questions? Yes, sorry.
Are you familiar with any AI laws coming into place to help address the job loss situation? Maybe with universal basic income, where everyone gets a small amount of the revenue from what AI is doing globally?
So it's an interesting question, and it's moving a lot. I have a stake in that debate, and I gave a slight hint on it with the Declaration of Agents. Most of the logic of that position, I think, is based on a fundamental miscalculation of what the value of AI is, mostly because of token usage. And that's because they have no way to measure the value of the output. Tokens are an input on AI, and they are quantifiable. And as it turns out, we're at a phase of the cycle where it has been disclosed that all of the hyperscalers had been offering compute services at less than the cost of the tokens, and they're now raising prices, and that is causing massive disruption for businesses. So the old argument was, well, the AI companies are doing huge volumes of compute, which they're not telling their customers. Based on those huge volumes, once, like Uber, once it scales up and they charge the full price, then they would have enormous amounts of business at enormous scale. But I think that's fundamentally flawed because that's the cost input. And even amongst that debate, the price of tokens issue has been exposed as having some variation to it. But also, the quality of the AI for the price you're paying is being revealed to be quite poor. So people are realizing they are spending much higher amounts than they realize, in fact, more than the cost that it takes to employ the people. And Sam Altman came out and he said that narrative of AI just decimating jobs in IT and other sectors and service sectors may not quite happen because it turns out the AI is more expensive than they believed. So I think it's a very significant issue. A week or two ago, there were pronouncements from the Financial Stability Board and a couple of large financial institutions that because of that assumption and the amount of debt that the hyperscalers have taken on, it's now a threat to financial stability. So I think that will unwind. But in its place, I would argue there should be some sort of calculation of output. Now, one of the things that I'm working on is a standard, and I'll talk about standards tomorrow, both in the context of everybody's doing standards, but ones that I've worked on, what it shows us. And I think there'll be a repricing of AI. I actually think that people will look at the value of the inference, the value that you get when you use AI, and I think in places like the UK, ordinary business owners will be taxed on the usage of AI. And that is a complete different valuation. And I also think that whoever successfully calculates that formula and attaches it to a financial instrument will have developed a whole new financial infrastructure and probably be very wealthy.
You have agents.
I have about, I think I'm now up to about 4. So I have the agent that I showed, which, and I should say, Matthew is somebody who I'm working with on the agent company structure, and Matt is one of the voters in our governance structure, and we'll be hopefully developing a vote this week. And then I have some agents that I've used for testing, but within the legal sector, we're quite behind. We're not using agents that much, but we probably will do. Yes.
Thank you so much for getting ready to.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.